Section 2 of Chapter 1 is the dual character of labor embodied in commodities. So in Section 1 we talked about the use value and exchange value of commodities. Labor also has this dual character. There is concrete labor and abstract labor. And this corresponds to the use value and the exchange value of labor. Concrete labor is the specific labor process, like producing coats or widgets or whatever you're making. Abstract labor is the fact that labor is taking place. So, like employment as a whole might represent abstract labor, but the commodities you produce represent the concrete value of that labor. Now, Marx gets into a little bit about the division of labor here. He points out that people aren't going around exchanging identical items for identical items. I'm not going to trade you a coat for identical coat because that doesn't make any sense. I have what I want. Trading you an identical commodity doesn't make me any better off. So commodity production, since remember a commodity is something produced for exchange, there necessarily needs to be a bit of a division of labor. One group makes coats, the other group makes pants. So with this social division of labor, the use value of a commodity is not modified by this. Coats were just as useful before tailors existed, but tailors specifically make coats. Marx writes, quote, "Labor, then, as the creator of use values, as useful labor, is a condition of human existence which is independent of all forms of society. It is an eternal, natural necessity which mediates the metabolism between man and nature, and therefore human life itself." Here he's saying that it doesn't matter if you're living under feudalism or capitalism or communism, you're still going to have a need for human labor. Whether that's human labor in fastening arrowheads for hunting or creating machines for automation, there's still human labor involved. If people aren't doing something useful, humanity will die out, no needs will be met. Marx goes on to elaborate that this carries over into humanity's relationship with nature. Humans are not some entity apart from nature. We come into this world through a natural process, we interact with nature. Our cities are the result of the interaction with nature. We mine iron out of the ground and then we fasten it into steel beams that we use to make large buildings. And this kind of makes sense if you can think about beavers make dams out of the natural materials around them. Human civilization is just this process scaled up. We take materials around us, we build civilization. The materials for all commodities come from nature. We simply take what nature has provided and modify it through a labor process. When combining materials to produce a commodity through labor, the labor process adds value to the commodities, such that the commodity is worth more than the sum of its components because you had to do work to bring those components together. This is why a car is much more valuable than an equal amount of metal dug out of the ground. In terms of use value of labor, we see a transformation of quantity into quality. A large quantity of labor went into making that metal useful, and it went from being just a hunk of metal to a car. There's a qualitative change there brought about by a large quantity of effort. The productivity of labor determines how much value can be produced for a given quantity of labor. So if it takes half as long to produce a commodity, its value is cut in half, even if it has an equal use value. This is again because the socially necessary labor time sets the value of a commodity. As society makes more commodities, the number of use values increases. One coat can clothe one person, two coats can clothe two people. So increasing the number of use values in society represents an increase in the wealth of that society. But because you can arrive at that situation through reducing the socially necessary labor time of commodities, you can have a situation to where the material wealth of society will increase while the value per commodity decreases. And this really drives the point in that the same amount of labor being performed for the same amount of time produces the same amount of value. Increasing the number of commodities that are produced just distributes that value over a larger number of commodities. The value per commodity goes down. And the value per commodity goes down because less time is spent per commodity. Lastly, I just want to point something out to connect some dots that will become useful later. If you remember, services are commodities, not just tangible physical things. So labor power is a commodity. You can hire someone to perform a task for you. You pay them to work, so you are buying labor power. That'll be a crucial thing to keep in mind as we proceed through this book. You don't need to know that now, but it will become useful later.